wise man once said that comics are meant to be fun, and I wholeheartedly agree. While the medium has grown far beyond the pow, fuck, zap preconceptions of the past, it has done so at the expense of what made it so enjoyable in the first place. Sure, it's great that today's reader can pick up a Batman comic and feel that they're not being talked down to because it contains excessive violence, nudity, or profanity, but this trade-off has significant consequences for both the property and the medium it represents. When you take a product designed for young readers and attempt to adapt it for an older audience, you're going to reach a point of critical dissonance, one that many of my fellow OGs feel has come and gone. Indeed, many of us don't read new comics at all, for the simple reason that they don't provide us what it is that we desire from them. That is, of course, the fun that wise guy was talking about earlier. But instead of dwelling on the negative, we're going to do what old guys do, and that's cast our minds back to a time when pocket change got you more smiles than your face could contain. Grab your short box, your bags and boards. It's time for breakfast.
Breakfast!
Good morning and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason MINK. Now, you all know me. I'm not a complex guy. I like a wink and a joke and a drink and a smoke. Of course I appreciate the heights that the comics medium has risen to. It's wonderful that graphic novels are now reviewed in the New York Times, and the medium is treated with the respect after being consigned to the cultural ghetto for so long. That said, this acceptance comes with the medium developing a self-awareness and sense of responsibility that can interfere with a long-time reader's enjoyment. As an adult of a certain age, the last thing I want to read is thinly veiled social propaganda in the guise of entertainment. I don't look to pop culture to dictate my morality, nor do I conflate the accomplishments of real people with fictional creations. For me, comics are an escape from the mundane and oppressive fetters of reality. The last thing I want to see in those pages is the misery, hatred, and division that's being beamed into our lives 24/7. Opening the pages of an old comic is essentially a cutoff switch, providing, even for a few moments, respite from the endless garbage that the world heaps upon our plates. And I'd be hard-pressed to find a comic that made that point better than this. Appearing in nearly 200 films, actor George Gabby Hayes is best known for his roles in Hollywood period westerns. Usually cast as comics relief, Gabby was your typical old coot type, his ornery attitude and down-home sensibilities making him a favorite among movie-going audiences during the Depression and war years. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I recognize Gabby more as an archetype than for any of his specific roles, but comics? Well, that's another story. I knew the moment that I set eyes on this book that I had to read it, and for under $1, well, that was more than doable. So, was it worth my 3/4, or am I hopped up on the loco weed? Let's find out. In our first story, we join Gabby at the rawhide shooting contest. He dominates the other contestants with his shooting iron, a hand cannon of considerable prowess. I mean, he just took out a tree with one shot. That's some firepower right there. Watching from a safe distance, bank robber Hoot Holler and his gang get it into their heads to rob the old geezer. With a gun like that, why, nothing could stand against him. Hoot lassos the coot and the gang get away with the weapon, leaving Gabby to chew out Corker, his horse. What the hell is he supposed to do? Soon enough, the gang is using the gun to blast bank vault doors clean off their hinges. Feeling partly responsible for the robberies, Gabby goes after the gang. And he'd better hustle, as they've knocked over 10 banks in the last 3 days. Criminals or not, that's a solid work ethic. Hoot and his gang take refuge in the town of Hideout, where criminals are celebrated and the innocent are run out of town. It's like Bizarro World, only with booze, burlesque, and buckskin. Gabby gets wind of this and heads in after them, but doesn't get far before some varmints louse him up. Dragged towards deadly rocks by a startled horse, Gabby is saved at the last moment by his own steed, Corker, who snaps the rope that binds him. Freed, Gabby starts in to throw in hands. He licks the cowpokes fair and square, but the residents of Hideout are less than honorable folk and gang up on our hero with the intent of tarring and feathering him. However, you gotta wake up pretty early in the morning to get one over on old Gabby, who manages to once again turn the tables. With the entire town now defeated and humiliated, Hoot Holler himself steps into the fray, intent on shooting Gabby with his own gun. But Gabby isn't shook, instead stepping to, with the townsfolk stating he's either crazy or the bravest hombre that ever lived. Counting on Hoot being soft, Gabby allows the trigger to be pulled. His wager pays off as the powerful recoil proves too much for Hoot to handle. The criminal is sent sprawling, and Gabby retrieves his gun just in time. An angry mob is formed, with the intent of rubbing this troublesome stranger out once and for all. And what happens next? Well, you just have to see to believe. Gabby literally shoots the town until it explodes, the buildings going up in a blazing conflagration. With Hoot and his men in tow, Gabby returns home, content in the knowledge that the town of Hideout is no more. In the issue's second story, Gabby and his main squeeze, Hetty, head off to one of them new picture-taking parlors. The pithy pair are strapped into stiff chairs so they don't move while the photo is being taken, and act with unintended consequences. It seems the booth has some pesky flies buzzing about, one of which lands squarely on Gabby's snoot just as the picture is taken. The resulting photo is less than flattering, leading Gabby to demand his money back. When the photographer balks at this, Gabby gives him a poke in the chops for his trouble before he and Hetty storm out. The photo gets noticed by the townsfolk, who find the image a riot. The photographer, knowing a good thing when he sees it, soon prints up dozens of copies, selling the gag photo for 10 cents a throw. That's a lot of scront back then. Gabby gets wind of this and heads back to give the guy a real beatdown. However, the photographer manages to talk Gabby into posing for a better picture, one which will redeem him in the eyes of the townsfolk. However, once Gabby is locked back into the chair, the photographer continues to make sport of him, taking a series of humiliating images against the old cowpoke's will. "Where's that horse of yours, Gabby?" With a few heavies on hand to help out, Gabby is then tossed into a bathtub, which really gets him riled. He gets the better of the heavies and chases the photographer out into the street, but the quick-thinking Con switches places with the town bruiser and makes a quick getaway. However, the wooden railing gives way as he runs overhead, sending him plunging into the street. Soon enough, the photographer is pummeled, the pictures are pooched, and Gabby heads off to his next adventure. In The Human Porcupine, we meet Miss Ellie Hempstead, owner of the Bar Nothing Ranch. She's introduced to Mr. Porcupine Quill, who claims to be the toughest hombre of them all. It seems he has his heart set on being the foreman of the Bar Nothing, but that's already old Gabby's gig. An assistant foreman attempts to evict the intruder, but gets the surprise of his life when his fist is impaled on Porky's bristly beard. He's laid out just as Gabby makes the scene, But the old duffer can't land a blow on Porcupine thanks to his razor-like facial hair. Our hero is knocked down by Porky, which is a mighty humiliating thing to happen in front of the boss. However, Gabby ain't one to stay licked for long, and he challenges Porcupine to a boxing match. This goes about as well as you'd expect. After stiffening his beard with a mysterious solution, Porcupine is all but invulnerable to Gabby's blows. Punched out, Gabby gets whomped. In rage, he comes at Porky with a set of shears. Talk about unsportsmanlike. The shears shatter on Porky's steely beard, and, humiliated, Gabby slinks off. Later, he's fixing to tender his resignation as foreman, but overhears Porky and his henchmen making plans to rob Miss Ellie Blind. Flying into a rage, Gabby leaps onto the wagon and dumps a bucket of hair-softening solution on Porcupine's head. Porky then throws a bucket of hair-stiffening solution at Gabby, leaving our hero's own whiskers, now razor-sharp. Gabby's beard shreds the wagon canvas as well as the evildoer's knuckles. Porky, now defenseless, pleads for mercy, but Gabby's set to give the ornery cowpoke what's coming to him and delivers a knockout blow. The battle won, his fellows cheer him on, with Gabby wondering just how he's going to trim his whiskers. Great stuff, and criminally underrated to boot. Okay, sure, these stories might not appeal to everyone. After all, this sort of thing is pretty far back in the cultural rearview mirror. But that said, if you can put your preconceptions aside and just enjoy it for what it is, this book is powerful fun. You heard it here first. When it comes to buying old comics, I've learned to trust my ample gut. And while sometimes a cover is too good to be true, other times it's your first and best hope for picking something fun out of the endless pile. And when I saw this book, well, I knew that I was in like Flynn. No, I don't know who Kona is or collect Dells exclusively. I bought this because it has a kitty. It's a giant kitty, no less. I mean, how can you go wrong? Okay, that's a pretty flimsy rationale, but what can I say? I just had a feeling about it. So how did that turn out? Our story opens with children Mason and Lily trapped in the paw of a monster. Jungle Man Kona leaps into the fray to protect them, but is swatted aside like a catnip mouse. Ooh, that's gotta hoit. Dr. Dodd, who can't be arsed to whip out a Band-Aid, instead wonders how such a monstrosity came to be. Well, wonder no more. This is Amsat, the cat, pet of the soldiers doing atomic tests on this tropical island. He's also great at catching rats, a pastime that leaves him missing the last boat off the now irradiated island. This being 1960s radioactivity, aka the good kind, Amsat soon grows to enormous proportions. And here he is now, pinning two defenseless children to the ground. Okay, sure, this should be terrifying, but look at that face. Aww, he's just playing. Kona contemplates a course of action, while the narrative doubles back, telling us stuff we already more or less know. It's puzzling, the constant whipping back and forth between time frames. It's almost like the pages got mixed up, and the writer just kind of did their best to make sense of what was happening. Turns out Amsat likes fish more than rats, but every time he eats one, he ingests more radiation, which makes him even larger. In fact, he gets so big, he starts catching sharks. Bad kitty! Leave it! Kona decides enough is enough and sets about rescuing the kids, no matter how adorable his foe might be. Happily, he's aided by a nearby T-Rex. Hey, when you're tangling with a 30-foot Mr. Whiskers, you take whatever help you can get. In the melee, the kids manage to escape. His prey lost, and the T-Rex getting the best of him, Amsat turns tail and begins to run. He escapes the dinosaur, but continues to lurk around the island. Kona and the gang rally, trying to come up with a plan to defeat their feline adversary once and for all. Several ideas are suggested and shot down before the doctor comes up with a winner. They'll sedate the cat, putting it to sleep. And, while it's sleeping, they'll burn it alive. Wait, Is this still a Dell comic? Sheesh. To make the scenario even more hellish, it's decided to torch sections of the jungle to herd Amsat to where the group wants him. Considering the fact these folks are stuck on an otherwise uninhabited island, maybe setting it ablaze isn't such a great idea. But hey, common sense be damned. We've got a cat to sedate. The dope is smeared on an arrow, and lunkhead Kona sets off to deliver the goods. Amsat is shot, and Kona chums the water to draw some playmates for the colossal cat. Soon enough, the sharks appear. Unable to help himself, Amsat dives in and begins to attack and eat his favorite snack, but it's then the drug takes hold. Weakened, the poor kitty finds himself losing strength and quickly succumbs to the deadly predators. With a final plaintive meow, Amsat vanishes at last beneath the now crimson waves. And I can't help but feel sorry for the poor kitty, especially since it turns out these clowns aren't stranded here after all. I mean, they've had a boat this whole time. Why they needed to kill Amsat when they could just leave is beyond me, but hey, maybe I'm overthinking it. So yeah, this book destroyed me. While my imagination is capable of conjuring some fairly provocative images when it comes to the concept of anatomically mutated felines, never did I imagine them as giant adorable kittens. I'm not sure if this representation was crafted to hew to the conservative standards of the time or if the writer was deliberately creating something campy, but whatever the case, it works. Kona was never the sort of book that was going to compete against Marvel or DC in their prime, but that's okay. It's not going for that. By steering clear of the overtly serious and melodramatic, the creators have crafted a tale that can be enjoyed by readers of all ages, even 5 decades later. That's how you do it, folks. We're going to put the cherry on top of this particular Sunday with Superboy number 127. Now, as a kid, I would have turned my nose up at this comic. What can I say? It was the 1970s, and my sensibilities were shaped by being part of that moody and tumultuous decade. However, as a post-jaded adult living in crazy times, well, the seemingly optimistic insanity this book is prepared to offer more than fits the bill. So how does this one stack up? Well, there's only one way to find out. You want a splash page? Oh, DC's got your splash page. With her bio ring, Lana can become any bug. Girl. Any bug girl. Lest you think this is somehow weird. Our tale begins in a Smallville High biology class where Lana helpfully reveals to readers she was once the insect queen. In case the cover was torn off and you skipped that splash page. A student returns from a field trip, his net full of bugs, and young Clark Kent is tasked with putting them in the chlorophyll. Only killing is against Clark's code. What's a young pacifist to do? Why, vandalize school property and perpetuate an untruth, that's what. There's nothing in the code against breaking windows and leaving others to take the blame, apparently. Lana heads home, excited at the prospect of a trip to Africa with her father. And gee, who wouldn't be? Just then, a gust of wind sweeps their passports out the window. No problem. Lana will just become a water skater bug and scoop them up. This is the perfect excuse for Lana to confide in her father about that strange day when she left home a little girl and returned an insect queen. Ain't puberty something? Gifted the remarkable bio ring by a friendly alien, Lana discovers the joys of transmogrification. And cheating, which is clearly what she's doing here by using her many insect arms to quickly get through this after-school punishment. Wait, she's writing ecstasy? Nothing weird about this panel, folks. Move along. Soon the Langs are on their way to the Dark Continent via Superboy Express. That's right, they're sitting on untethered luggage, no seatbelts, while being carried high in the air on a board. To Africa. Sure, it's not as efficient as taking a plane, but obviously the writer's having trouble figuring out what to do with Superboy in a story that isn't really about him. Lana decides to change into a damselfly and starts buzzing around like the pest she is. Just then, an errant sea wind sweeps her fragile form into the ocean. No problem. She'll just turn into a lobster girl. Lobster can swim, right? Suddenly, a shark appears. Man, where's Amsat when you need him? Using a claw, Lana tugs on Superboy's cape, and somewhere, Jim Croce shakes his head in disgust. Later, in Africa, the Langs discover their guide is laid up. But it's cool. His 15-year-old son Kim can lead them just as well. The professor wants to drop by his buddy Pelham's house, but on the way, he'd like to poke around for that lost pyramid he's heard so much about. A sudden storm whips up, and lightning strikes a nearby tree, blocking the path. Transforming into a giant caterpillar, Lana weaves the trio a shelter with her hiney. Raining or not, you couldn't pay me enough to go into that thing. Once the storm is abated, the gang head back out. The lost pyramid isn't going to find itself. And hey, here it is. It's a little shorter than we might have expected, but that's because it's a grower and not a shower. You see, it's been buried this whole time, hence the lost part. Weird, since these tourists found it by simply walking in a seemingly random direction for all of 30 seconds, but let's not make a big deal out of it. We've still got a lot of story to get through. Turns out digging up pyramids can get you some heat from the locals, and a nearby tribe attacks the interlopers for violating their sacred pyramid. Lana chases them off by becoming a cicada girl, but Kim catches a spear in the chest for his trouble. He's rushed to Dr. Pelham's place, but there's little that can be done. Unless... Before you can say parental consent for him, Pelham has jammed Kim up with a serum full of bee juice. And man, it works fast. However, it's not all peaches and cake, as Kim is the sensitive type, and waking up as a bee proves traumatic to the teen. He buzzes off into the jungle with Lana in hot pursuit. There, the two stumble across this guy, who, in all fairness, is no weirder looking than they are. Talk about judgmental, huh? Turns out the beastie is just a movie prop. The real monster here is actor Grant Sutherland and his alcohol consumption, which threatens to derail the entire picture. The kids take it upon themselves to torment the already addled actor in their insect forms with the idea that it'll scare him straight. Never mind the fact that all the boozing has weakened his heart and shaken his nerves, making him far more likely to have a heart attack and drop dead on the spot. Hey, this is comics. In spite of this good deed, Kim is still pretty upset. I mean, look at him. I don't blame the kid one bit. Lana does her best to make it up to him, but you just can't please some b-boys. Later, he's abducted by the film crew to use as a monster. I bet Grant Sutherland will be thrilled when he sees that. So Superboy, remember Superboy? This is his comic. Lana summons him for help, but the act has unintended consequences. Kim discovers Lana is sweet on the Metropolis Marvel, dashing whatever freaky dreams that he's come up with. Broken-hearted, B-Boy buzzes off, soon whipping himself up this swingin' bachelor pad. Welcome to the Honeycomb Hideout. Only two up-and-coming witch doctors decide to make their reps by burning the strange creature alive. Lana appears and becomes a moth girl to extinguish the flames, but it doing so puts her in range of the witch doctor's deadly dust. Before you know it, Lana has forgotten her past life, content to stay in the jungle as B-Boy's queen. Say it ain't so! Yeah, it ain't so. It turns out this is just one of those weird ruses DC would pull to create drama, then immediately dial back. It turns out Lana was just saying that stuff to make B-Boy happy. Why she would do that only to sneak back to Smallville is the real mystery. Is bitch a type of insect? B-Boy understandably takes this real personal-like. I mean, he was a normal kid until these idiots bumbled into his life, and now they're just going to leave him like this in the jungle? He tries to kill himself by stinging something, anything, but Superboy manages to talk him down with some nonsense about finding him an antidote. More lies! The issue ends, but the mystery of the found pyramid remains for another day. So yeah, from Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis through William Burroughs' Naked Lunch, resolving in this, perhaps the ultimate denouement of insectoid transformation. I gotta say, in spite of DC's reputation as a square company, stories like this showed that they were capable of delivering some startling concepts and imagery. I mean, LANA as a centipede writing on a chalkboard is as weird and subversive as anything I've ever seen in an underground comic. One might argue that Lana's laissez-faire attitude towards her transformations somehow invalidates the horror, but to me, it magnifies it. In spite of her ability to manifest grasshopper legs or razor-sharp beetle-like mandibles, she still has all the desires and hang-ups of a regular teenager. What is hideous to us is just another step in landing a date with that dreamy Superboy. Who cares if she was a stink bug 10 minutes ago? The insect queen is clearly all girl. However you enjoy your comics, the important thing to remember is to enjoy them. You didn't get into the hobby because you had a bunch of money burning a hole in your pocket or because you wanted to worry about completing a run. You did it because, for however briefly, it provided you with a sense of pleasure and enjoyment that you couldn't find elsewhere. In the end, comics can be just about anything, but what they should always be is fun. I'm Jason Mink, and I hope to see you next Sunday at breakfast.